Good afternoon. I am Dr. Eugenia Johnson, with Assistant Professor in the Division of Education. Welcome, everyone. I am honored to introduce you to my Aurora, and I can say that gently because she's like my Aurora, Aurora Ross. She has served as a student in my courses, my advisee, and also my honor student. She will be receiving a Bachelor of Science in Middle School Education, specializing in both math and science. Additionally, she will be receiving a minor in philosophy. Aurora is involved in a community music program, teaching percussion, in Walsh's band, playing as a percussionist, World Music Ensemble. She loves playing traditional African music. She serves as a student teacher at Hartford Middle School. They're going to take her, I can already tell you. They love her, they really do. Aurora has also been studying transcendentalism since high school. And she got interested because her mom was interested in the topic and taught her about the topic. So I think you will find it very interesting to hear what she has to tell us and share with us about her research. Thank you.
Now that I'm up here, I'm more nervous. I'm very short, so nobody can see me in Zoom. It's okay. Oh, now we can see. It's like right here. So my name is Aurora, as you know. My research investigates current feminist dogma and these ideas and takes an exploration of transcendentalism to investigate community involvement and understanding of the feminist movement. So I'm taking all these ideas and I'm going to do a lot with it. That's great. So first I want to go over a few terms that I'm going to be using throughout the presentation to get you familiar with what I'm talking about. So American transcendentalism is a type of literary philosophy that encourages individuals to think about their own thinking, think about their place in society, and where they stand in the hierarchy and how they can move away from that. And it developed in antebellum America. So I'm focusing on what transcendentalism has happened in America, even though it has developed globally. In America specifically, after the Civil War, we began to move away from these Eurocentric ideals. So I want to focus on what we've done since then. Cardinal beliefs are statements concerning the social hierarchy of women, and they gauge personal beliefs towards contemporary feminism. So a cardinal belief would be, do you think that women and men should be paid the same amount for the same work? Yes would be an approval of that cardinal belief. Contemporary feminism focuses on equal rights, the empowerment of all minorities, and the importance of intersectionality. So that's my definition for contemporary feminism that I'm going to use. Consciousness raising comes from transcendentalism, and it is a method of engaging individuals in critical thinking about their place in society. There are also consciousness raising groups. These are formal meetings where individuals think about their place in society and were heavily utilized in the late 19th century during the transcendental movement in America. Intersectionality is the sociological understanding of intersecting social identities and related systems that are present in society. So those are some things that I'm just going to continuously talk about. I want to look at this quote first. So among African American, Latinx, and white millennials, more say they do not identify as a feminist in any way. And this is taken from public opinion surveys across the United States from Gen forward. So more millennials are saying that they do not identify as a feminist in any way. And what I'm looking at is why this is, why there is this lack of identification. So many young people have feminist ideals, but they do not identify as feminists. My goal was to provide a new outlook on feminist objectives and ways to reach them within a community. I'm going too fast, just be like, I'm just passionate. So I use a small scale consciousness raising process to do that. And I'm going to talk about that a lot more. That's pretty much the point of all of this. I utilized an exploratory mixed methods design. So I took quantitative pieces and reported those in percentages. Then I took qualitative pieces and reported those as recurring main themes. And this was drawn from 155 responses in my survey, while I was expecting 100. So I got a good turnout for the survey, and it pretty much worked. As I said, I utilized a web-based questionnaire through SurveyMonkey. It's pretty familiar to work with and easy to do. So I adapted the feminist beliefs and behavior measure from Dr. Alyssa Zucker. I talked with her and decided a way that I would be able to implement this into my own research. She's a professor of women's studies at the University of Florida. So personal beliefs towards feminism are gauged by cardinal beliefs. So they would answer questions about cardinal beliefs, and that would gauge their personal beliefs towards feminism. Personal feminist identification resulted from support of contemporary feminist objectives. Then social identity was examined through this small-scale consciousness raising process. So I have a few research questions that I address in my research. How do college students at a private liberal arts institution with religious affiliations define contemporary feminism? So this is my focus group that I have, and all of these questions address that. To what extent do these students identify as feminists? Are feminist discussions an active part of students' participation in feminism? And is social activism a way in which college students participate in feminist activity? So the significance of this research is to gain a better understanding of feminist ideals by utilizing this consciousness raising framework. I want to use that as a backbone to further shape how young people look at feminism and think about these ideas and decide what they want to project into society. So I'm going to go over each question in order as I listed them out. So the first one is about how they define contemporary feminism. On the left, you'll see that's what I have, that's my ideas, and then the right is supported by what I got from my survey. So women's and equal rights were the main focus of their definitions. 72% said that women's and equal rights was the defining topic of contemporary feminism. There was minimal focus on intersectionality, and there's that word that we had in our definition of contemporary feminism. 8 individuals in the survey mentioned intersections in their definition. So they mentioned race and age and gender are all involved in feminism. Attitudes towards the definition are majorly good. So when asked what is their attitude towards the feminist label, 40% said it was good, 21% said it was bad. The rest of this percentage goes to these 38% that said it was neither. And they gave an explanation for why they thought this was. So looking at it as good or bad, they said it was neither. And they said that this is conditional to social context. A lot of answers said that it just really depends. And we can see this in an example that I have. One respondent said, it depends on the context in which it is applied. Are you a feminist as in supporting women? Yes. Are you a feminist as in hating men? No. So you can see this dichotomy of the definition and their willingness to say whether or not they're a feminist. And we want to look at more why this is. I have another example, and this individual brought up intersectionality. So they define feminism as the idea that men and women are equal, and now interpret it as extending towards fighting for the equality of all people, regardless of those intersections, age, race, etc. So this is a table I took directly from my research. This is where that feminist beliefs and behavior measure comes into play. On the left, you can see that there's the approval of cardinal beliefs, and on the right, on the top actually is their personal identification. So this is a cross-tabulation table. What's highlighted in yellow is how I categorized the participants based on how these answer these questions. So the top 2 highlighted categories are based on the approval of 3 beliefs. So that question do you think men and women should be paid the same? They answered yes. So they had an approval of 3 cardinal beliefs. 44% were categorized as feminists. So they had those cardinal beliefs, they identified with the label. Almost 24% had those 3 cardinal beliefs, but did not identify as a feminist. So they're categorized as a non-labeler. Almost 6% were uncategorized, and that's that little confusing category where they didn't have all the cardinal beliefs. That means they answered no to at least one of them, but they still identified as a feminist. And then 25% were non-feminist. So they had no cardinal beliefs and they did not identify as feminist. What I wanted to look at was that non-labeler and that uncategorized. Where is the disconnect in there? So this can come into light based on the extent of feminist identification. We can see why this is happening. There is an awareness and avoidance of extremist feminism. That can be seen in the definition that we talked about earlier. There's something in that societal context that tells that people think they just don't want to identify with that kind of label. When asked, how did you become a feminist, or how did you decide not to become a feminist? 51% said they understood the defining characteristics. They solidified this definition in their mind and they decided, yes, I want to become a feminist. I want to define myself as a feminist. 42% said they were not a feminist and or did not want to be associated with the label. So they might have had those feminist beliefs, but they decided they just did not want to be a part of that label. They didn't want to be defined as a feminist. So there's this hesitancy to personally identify oneself as a feminist. And I also looked at comfort level. So extent of identification came with comfort level. How comfortable are you with identifying as a feminist? 24% said they were very comfortable. 20% said slightly, and 25% said in between. So we see that there's a large percentage of those who are in between. And a lot of those individuals had an understanding of what feminism is in their personal definition, but again, they had this hesitancy to prescribe the label to them. So participation in feminist discussion, looking at this, we can see there's a small portion that have feminist related discourses. 11 respondents answered, yes, I participate in feminist discussions. But then I got confused because 3 times that amount gave topics of discussion. So 11 said yes, 22 said no, but they still gave a topic anyway. So I got confused for a few days. But looking at their results and kind of going back and analyzing some other data, I came to a couple conclusions. Looking at those who answered yes and gave topics, 27% of those individuals had a focus on women's and equal rights, which makes sense because if we look back at our definition, most of these respondents said feminism is about women's and equal rights. So it makes sense that they're talking about it. Now, these 22 that gave topics but said, no, I don't actually participate, may have misunderstood what the question was about, or might have misunderstood what it means to be in a discussion. So this could have been an interpretation of asking about daily conversations. Do you participate in feminism? Meaning daily conversations of their own volition. Versus what topics do you participate in may have been thought of as an interaction that was just brought up and they decided to interject in it. And that's what I came to the conclusion of. But definitely more conversations can be had. There is a low percentage of respondents that participated in this section of the survey. It is perhaps better understood as an epistemological shift. Tiffany K. Wayne says this in her book, Woman Thinking, and she's referring to consciousness raising here. So looking back at that, we can see that there's not a lot of discussion happening, but there was also confusion on what we know is discussion. So looking at consciousness raising as an epistemological shift and not as an organized movement can really let you see that feminism, the ideas of feminism can be discussed in everyday life and that still be an active participation in society. Like we're still having active participation and discussion about this, even if it doesn't seem organized, there's no unified membership. You're not saying, I go to this group to talk about this specific thing. And lastly is participation in social activism. We can see again that there is a lack of respondent participant. 25 respondents gave topics of activism that they participate in. So again, this was out of 155 individuals. This is a part of the survey where I started to get less and less answers. Out of these 25 individuals, 32% said that politics is a way that they are active in, that they participate in activism. And this involved things like BLM, going to protests, the Women's March, and voting. 20% said they use social conversations as a part of their activism. And I'm gonna go back to that because that's like a really important thing. Well, just put a pin in it. We can see that they're not prone to activism, but there is this openness to educating others. 21% said they are very likely to educate others on feminist issues. 35% said they are likely to educate others on feminist issues. So there might not be this activism and going out and going and marching about it, but there's definitely a willingness to communicate with others and talk about it. There's also this agreement with feminist principles. 71% said that they believe feminist principles should be adopted throughout society. And that's, again, out of 155 participants, 71% said that this should be an active part of society. 74% said they vote for political representatives with feminist ideas. And this is important to look at because we have this agreement that feminist principles should be in our society and we should discuss and educate others on this. But there's not a lot of activism. And thinking about this, Margaret Fuller was a part of the Transcendental movement. She promoted activism of the mind. And it might not be seen as something that's true as activism, but consciousness raising and thinking about these ideas are meant to stimulate them to think about these ideas in society and how they relate to true activism. Interactions with peer groups, especially those who are like-minded, these are consciousness raising processes and they really benefit those who are in it. So hopefully in the future, we can see more consciousness raising embedded into social research and case studies, and definitely more on this focus group. We powered through it, we're getting through. If you have any questions, you can definitely ask. I know what wait time is. Yes.
You said earlier that 42% of the population believe in feminist ideals, yet they didn't identify as feminists.
42%. So 42% said that they
believed in like feminist ideals, but they didn't identify themselves as feminists.
Oh, yes, the table. I know.
Did you ask why? I'm just curious why.
So in the survey, we have this 23% that had this approval of cardinal beliefs, but they did not identify as a feminist. And then they discussed in other sections of the survey more about their social identity. How did you become a feminist? Why did you decide not to prescribe the label? And a lot of those came because it was dependent on social context. So they had this idea that about feminism, and they solidified this definition in their minds, but they still saw this dichotomizing definition in society, especially with extremists, and they decided not to prescribe that label. That's what a lot of the results indicated.
So they looked at it kind of amongst zealots, you know what I mean, for a cause rather than they could like assimilate well, right? Their peers that.
Yeah, you could say that. Yeah.
I was going to ask a question sort of related to that. Were there anything in the answers that made you think that there were people who didn't want to be labeled as a feminist because they don't like to be labeled?
Yes.
Because I mean, some of those people might not want to be labeled as progressive, conservative, or whatever else. It's the labeling itself,
yes,
rather than what they're being labeled as.
Yes.
Labeled as that might be. So talk about that a little.
Yes, so there were discussions where people just did not want to associate with a label, and it was a small percentage, but in those open-ended questions where they said, I don't want to be prescribed with a label, they usually added something onto that. So it was discussed, but it was it was widely spread throughout, so it was a small number.
I don't know if this is really a question, but as you were reading it and going along the percentage, I did notice a significant difference in like, I will stand up for certain things that but I don't really consider myself kind of like he was saying. Did you ever think like let's say 1960s, 1970s, maybe it's we're burning our crops. Oh, we're feminists, like we're fighting real hard, right? And it's apparent, we live it and we claim it. Do you ever think as the last 50, 60 years have gone to today, maybe the reason there's a unbalance in the answer is maybe we're all on some level finding a feminist movement, but we're so used to it that it's kind of gone subconsciously. Do you think that might be a difference? A reason as to why there's such a difference with percentages is, yes, I will fight as a feminist, but no, don't tell me I'm a feminist.
Yes, so there were this was definitely seen in, again, those open-ended questions where they got to talk about whatever. Some individuals would say, yes, I agree with what feminism is about,
Yeah.
but there are things that I don't want to be a part of. So I had one respondent talk about that and saying like the second wave and third wave feminism were just very, very up there, very rageful and very much wanting to change things in society. And they said that that's just not how they want to go about their participation.
So when you mention feminism, I think of two different worlds. I think of like the positive side of like, let's, work together and move forward. And then I know there's also a negative stigmatism to feminism where some people are like, oh no, I'm not going to say that. And sorry, I'm going to take over. But where do you think that came from? Where did you think like the positive is positive? Where do you think the negativity came from? Just from past behaviors? Just voice?
So that's a good question. Where the negativity came from, there's definitely extremists who definitely believe these things and support that. And I think it's just something that's been brought about as a stereotype now. Yes.
Great job.
Thank you.
Question on your data. When you were doing your survey, did you fill anything into it that would prevent or actually confirm that the data wasn't being skewed one way or another, asking questions in different manners?
I'm sorry, can you rephrase that?
Yeah, so actually, like you're plugging your survey data as I'm asking questions, a lot of times you'll see questions I answered, rewording them to see confirms that I answered that one question the same way multiple times to help that I'm not skewing my data, in one category or the other. I don't know if you built any of that.
Yeah, so that is one thing I thought about when I was making the survey. I definitely consulted who I was using that from and built off of what Dr. Zucker had already put out. I included that in my limitations that there might be misinterpretations. Yes.
Did you look at gender at all?
I definitely wanted to, but it would have been 100 pages and I don't think I would have known what to do. Like there's a lot of ideas that I can include with this. Like I'm very much about the intersecting ideas that all come together that all really, really relate. But again, it would be like 500 pages and I have to stop somewhere. Yes. So I still have all of this and I still have the software and I'm learning how to use it. I'm gonna throw it all in there. It's gonna be longer one day. Yes.
You see transcendentalism as a way to sort of better understand modern feminism? Is there a connection there?
Definitely. So transcendentalism is about thinking about your place in society. And feminism recognizes that there is something fundamentally wrong with women's place in society. That's how it started. And trying to give women more equal access, more equal rights, starting with women's suffrage and everything. So it's definitely linked to transcendentalism. And there's definitely more research out there that connects the two together and focuses more on the history that took place in the 19th century.
Thank you.